Here's lesson 7. Like I was telling you, that moving from determining greater than or less than with regard to decimal numbers, that's definitely much more simple than what we're looking at right now. This one, you're going to be taking the numbers apart or maybe even clumping them together to kind of see how rounding works. That's what we're looking at this time, is that this is saying that we're going to fill in the table and then round to a given place. And it's going to ask us to do that in 3 different ways. So looking at hundredths, tenths, and ones to start with. It says label the number lines to show your work and then circle the rounded number. So number lines, usually we think of them as being along this way, so that it's along the horizon. These ones go up and down. They're called vertical number lines. So in this case, let's look at the first thing we've got here. I'm going to go ahead and switch colors, get some black going here so that we can just write some numbers. So I'm going to take this 4 3/10, and I'm going to put it the way it is. Here's 4, here's our decimal, here's your 3/10. And now what I'm going to do is, because we've got 3 lines, I'm going to squish it together, and I'm going to take my ones and I'm going to break each one of these ones into 10 equal pieces so that it becomes 40. And then we're going to keep the 3/10 we already had. So we've got 43/10. And there is in neither of these cases any hundredths. But what we can do is bring this over, and we would be keeping the 0, because there's going to be a 0 in all 3 cases, that there aren't any hundredths there. But if I take those tenths and I say for every tenth, it's going to become 10 hundredths. 10 times 3 is 30. And now I'm going to say for every one of these tenths, what if I break those into 100 pieces each? 4 times 100, then we have 100 hundredths. And remember when I've kind of talked about that before, that if I had 4 hundredths and I multiply it times 100, that it gives me 4 ones. That word happens over and over and over again, that it results you in a 1. So if I had 1,000th and I said I have 1,000 thousandths, I have a 1, because that's what it takes to make a solid. And if you think about it with fractions, if I have 1,000 thousandths, that also is the same as 1. If I have, in this case right here, looking at that hundredths, if I have 400, I meant to make that a 0. If I have 400 400ths, that's a 1. Well, what if I have 400 100ths? So if I change that, I'm going to say, let's get this eraser over here. And what if I change that? What if I make that 4 become a 1? I'll get my pencil back. And what if it's 400 100ths? 400 100ths is the same as 4 ones. So let's take a look at what we've got over here. So I'm going to start with the ones. I'm going to start with the easy end of things, even though it's not the first one that you come to over here. I'm going to start with it anyway. And I know that if I round down, I'm going to have a 4. If I round up, I'm going to have a 5. And what's halfway in between? I know that I'm going to have 4.1, 4.2, and then 4.3. And this one is the midpoint. That's what they call this, is the midpoint, because you're halfway there. And then if we've got 4.6, 4.7, I'm just labeling every other one just because it's kind of, there's not a lot of room here. So then 4.9, and if I have one more tenth, then I have 10 tenths, which overflows. The 4 then becomes a 5. So if we're looking at this, we want to figure out where is 4.3 in this case. And so when we round, what's that going to get us? So I'm going to grab a different color here. Let's get exciting. Here we go. 4.3 happens to be right here. And it is closer to 4 than it is to 5. So the answer to this, when we round to the nearest ones place, it's a 4. Now let's check this one out. And I'm going to go back to the black again. So that way we can have something else just kind of stand out at the end. So this time we're looking at tenths. And so if we have 4 3/10, If we were to round down in that case, we know that it's just going to stay 4 3/10. It's not going to grow up at all. But if it does, it's going to come on up to the next tenth, which is 4/10. So then what would happen? In order to kind of change, this is going to go 4.3. To get to 4.4, we have to start actually thinking if we have a hundredths place here. So this right here is a 0. The next one up is going to be 4.3. What's next after 0? 1. So this one is going to be 4, 3, and then a 2. 4, 3, throw that decimal in there, and then a 3. 4, a 3, and then a 4. So what's the midpoint? The midpoint right here, we're continuing to count 4.3, and what's after 4? 5. So remember I was talking about our parents and myself taught that, if 5, then you go down. If it's a 5 or bigger, then you move up. Here's why. Because that's halfway there. So then the next one is 4.36, 4.37, 4.38, 4.39, and if you have 9, you add one more to it, becomes a 10. A 3 then becomes a 4. So it goes up. So now we switch colors. We get all exciting here. Let's go blue this time. This one, if we are rounding to the nearest tenths place, we have 4.3. We have no hundredths. So therefore, it's just going to stay 4.3. It's not going to change at all because there's nothing there to make that happen. And you can see that right here. 43 tenths. There are no hundredths to make it change. This one, it's going to be the same because there are no hundredths. So there is nothing over here in the thousandths that's going to impact that. So if this answer was 4 3/10, and right here we have 430 hundredths, what would we have up here? What's the next one? 431 hundredths, right? If we were rounding to that. But is there anything over here? Or is this all we have? That is all we have. What's halfway in between? 430, 430, and then we'd have to have 5/10 or 5/1000 over here, wouldn't we? In order to make that happen. Kind of weird. So the answer over here, if we were rounding to the nearest hundredths place, it's still going to stay 4.30. It's not going to change. All right, so I'm going to kind of show you where it's going so you can kind of expect a little bit of what we've got happening in the class today. This thing is just different. So how many tens do we have? We can see over here we have 2 tens, but we've got all these hundreds. So it's actually going to be 22 tens to start with, a 5 here. How many tenths? 200 tenths, or sorry, 2 tenths, sorry, and then 8 hundredths and 6 thousandths. And then we're going to start packing them all together. How many tens do we have or how many ones? If we take these tens and we break them all into ones, this is going to become not a 3, that's a 2. 2, 2, 5. 225 ones. Was this 225 ones? It is, isn't it? These stay the same. 2, 8, 6. Now we're going to put them all into the tenths place, right? And to put them all into the tenths place, it's going to be 2, 2, 2, 5. And then you keep your 8, 6 here. And then it just keeps getting 2, 2, 2, 5, 8, and then the 6. So it just kind of keeps munching together. So if we were going to round this and we look at the tens, so right here we know that if we have 22 tens, and then we think about 5 ones, so that's going to be 225 right here, which is the midpoint. So we probably would be rounding up. So that's the kind of thing we're going to be working on in class on the next day after you do this problem on your own. They've gone through and they've already put together the table for you so you can see what happens. They take 8 ones, they put them in the ones place first, but then they break it into 10 equal pieces. So now it's 85 tenths. And then these numbers stay. Then you break that 85 tenths into hundredths, and so on. So what you're looking at today is they want you to round to the nearest tens place. This is the tens place. They want you to round to the nearest hundredths place. So you're going to be thinking about, okay, I have, in this case, no tens, and I can go up to having 1 10. And then you think about, okay, so here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Here's 10 ones. Get you to having 110. Hundredths, the same kind of a thing. How many hundredths do we have in this problem? We have 4. 4 hundredths. And if we were rounding up, it's going to be 5 hundredths. So then we're thinking about, okay, 4 hundredths. How many thousandths do you have till it overflows? And so on. So I would like you to do both A and B on this one. B is going to be a challenge, I think. Let's see how it goes. If you got some good questions, bring them into me tomorrow. Bye.